Good afternoon everyone, hope you're all doing well. It's a nice day today and I decided I would do a video that's a wee bit different from the kind of videos that I've recorded in the past. Today we're going to be looking at my 5 favourite game mechanics. Okay? Now before we get started, these are just small mechanics, so they're not like genres of games, but they're little small mechanics that I find I really enjoy, and if you look at my top 50 games, or even top 20 games, you'll find that a lot of them share these mechanics. So the chances are, if you have a game design that has, say, even 3 of these mechanics in them, there's a very good chance I'm gonna really like that game. So, without further ado, we're going to start. We're going to work from 5 up to 1 in order of increasing preference, but just bear in mind that I love all these mechanics and they're all fantastic. So, without further ado, let's get started. So at number 5, we have bidding. Now this can be any type of bidding, it can be open bidding, closed bidding, but the reason I like it so much is it combines 2 things that I really enjoy in games, and that's economy and money management, and also player interaction. Bidding is just a good mechanic for tying players together, to make stakes high, and just to add a wee bit of tension to games. So examples of this would be Power Grid, where you're bidding for the different power plants, which is an integral part of the game. You have other games like The Estates, where you do a round of bidding, just 1 round and that's it. So when it comes round to you, you really need to think very carefully about how much you want to bid. Archipelago, there's a wee bidding at the start for turn order, which isn't the focus of the game, but turn order is quite important, so it's an interesting blind bid. You have Game of Thrones, where you're bidding power tokens for places in the track, which is a really important part of the game. You also have something like Arctic Scavengers, where you're holding guys back, and then at the end you reveal, and the combat value, if you have the most, allows you to grab that card in the middle. So to me that's kind of a form of bidding. And even games, bluffing games like Skull would be an example as well, where you're going around and you're increasing bids until no one else is willing to go to that level. So yeah, these are games that I really enjoy because of that bidding mechanic. So at number 4, we have negotiation. Now, I said for my number 5 bidding, that player interaction is something I really enjoy in games. I like interactive games, and negotiation, that's at the core. It's all about working with other people and, trying to, make deals and, take in all these variables. So examples of this would be Sidereal Confluence, which is a trading game, all about negotiation. That's pretty much the whole game, is talking to other people and making deals. Chinatown is much the same. It's really great. It's like a more streamlined, stripped down version, but the same thing applies. You've got, in one of my favourite games, TI4, there's a fair bit of negotiation. It's almost like a Cold War. You're trying to work with the other players and not really, step on each other's toes. You don't want to go to war because it's expensive. So there's a lot of talking back and forth. There's voting on the political agendas. So it's a big part of the game. New Angeles, which is probably one of my favourite negotiation games, is all about keeping the city running and working with other players, but at the same time you're trying to get ahead of your rival, so you only want to help each other out to a degree, so that's a really interesting one. You also have things like Sheriff of Nottingham, where you're trying to get your goods by the sheriff, and you're trying to make he's threatening you and you're trying to pay him off, so there's definitely a good bit of negotiation there. Cosmic Encounter, working with other players to win the game, helping players out by allying with them and then playing reinforcement cards. You've got Archipelago, which is a semi-co-op, so again, like New Angeles, you're working together to some degree, if you don't, then you'll tank the game, but you still want to come out ahead. And then you have games like Game of Thrones and Dogs of War. There are loads, where negotiation is a key mechanic of the game, and it's that interaction and that, that bouncing back with other players, which is one of the reasons we play games, makes these games great. Okay, so that's my number 4, that's negotiation. Okay, so at number 3, we have what I call simultaneous card selection, or really any game where you're choosing actions simultaneously, and then it's all revealed. And the reason I like this so much is because you're trying to read the other player's minds. You're trying to, second guess what they're going to be doing. And again, it's more interaction, and it's more, planning as well. So games that do this, there's loads, and again, these are all some of my favourite games. So you've got things like Comet, where the battle system, you're picking a card simultaneously, then revealing, and it's like a rock, paper, scissors thing. You've got Game of Thrones, which basically Comet borrowed the combat mechanic from. So those two kind of go together, and I love that type of combat system. You've got little games like Gravwell, where you are all picking a card for movement. So it's not about combat, it's all about movement, and then you're revealing, and depending on what your opponent's picked, that could influence the way you move your ship. So that's pretty much the game. You've got Scythe with the battle system, which isn't my favourite, but I do prefer that approach, to just chucking dice. Race for the Galaxy, which is one of my favourite games, and the main action for the round, you all pick a card, and that action that you pick will happen. And if you pick that, you'll get a bonus as well. If no one picks that particular action, it doesn't happen in that round of play, in that turn. So that's a huge part of the game. You've got Seven Wonders, where you're all it's like drafting, so that's simultaneous. Twilight Struggle, at the headline phase, you're all picking a card. Both players pick a card simultaneously and reveal. Cosmic Encounter for the combat, again similar to Game of Thrones and Comet. You're going to negotiate, are you going to attack? You're trying to read what your opponent's doing. And even games like Battlestar Galactica, where you're all picking cards and putting them into the deck. You might not be picking them simultaneously, but at the end they all get revealed, and you see whether you succeeded or failed. So you don't get to see what people are picking, you just know how many cards are in, and then you have to try and work it out. So games where you are basically picking actions, hidden actions, and then revealing them simultaneously or at the end of a phase, I think that's an amazing mechanic, and lots of the games that I've listed there have that mechanic that I really enjoy. So that's my number 3 simultaneous card selection. My number 2 favourite mechanic is what you could call multi-use cards, or potentially hand management, just depending on the way you look at it. Now, if you know me, you know I love games with cards. My last one was multi-use cards. I love cards in games. I love options in games. And multi-use cards to me are probably the cream of the crop. I like having a hand of cards and having lots of options, lots of things I can do with it, lots of decisions to mull over, interesting decisions. And multi-use cards really, really support that kind of mechanic. So you've got games like Imperial Settlers. It's probably one of the games that does this the best, where there's about 3 or 4 ways you can use every card in the game. So it doesn't matter what you've drawn, there are always options for you. There's always interesting decisions to be made. You've got Brass, which is, again, you're using cards for your actions. You're using them to build industries. You're using them to build links. You're using them for the location, for the industry, and to develop. It's all handled through cards, and the cards give you different options. You have Seven Wonders, where you can either build, you can sack the card and get some money, or you can upgrade your wonder and get it out the game. You've got a few options there. That's interesting as well. Race for the Galaxy. The whole game is cards. The cards are your tableau, they're your resources, everything is all cards. And that's such an elegant design, the fact that the cards can be used as resources, they can be used as the tableau, they're used for selecting actions. It's completely card driven, and it's just amazing that design is so tight with that. You've got games like Root, where you're crafting cards, or you're playing them in battle, so it's got a light card, multi-use cards. Twilight Struggle, where you can play the card for the event, or you can use the action points. That's a really big decision. You've got Innis, where you're drafting cards, and when you use them in battle, you can use them to make attacks, or you can use them to not take a casualty, or you can use the card for its ability. Cry Havoc is another great example, where the cards have different actions and you can combine them to make the action more powerful. So again, that's about managing your hand and using the cards at an optimal time to get the best out of them. And you can also use them in battle as well. So there's a choice to either use it in battle or use it for its action. And finally, Arctic Scavengers, which again, the cards, they have different actions on them. You can use them to, you know, dig through the pile. You can use them to buy cards. You can use them to draw more. You can keep them back for battle. There are lots of options there. So multi-use cards, or hand management in general, is an amazing mechanic. And if you look at my top games, a lot of them use it. So that is my number 2, and that is multi-use cards. Okay folks, we are now at number 1, my favourite game mechanic, and that is asymmetric. Not asynchronous, as some people say, asymmetric powers. I love games where everybody is a bit different. Everybody's unique. They've got their own tricks up their sleeves, they've got their own powers, they've got their own approach or own victory conditions. That to me just is such an amazing thing, because it makes you feel different from everyone else. It makes you feel special. So any game that has asymmetric powers is likely to be a hit for me. As long as the other mechanics and the game itself, everything's in place, that to me is like the icing on the cake. So there are tons of games. I mean, Android Netrunner, one of my favourite games ever, is a 2-player game, and you couldn't get more asymmetrical than that. You've got one player who's the hacker, who's building a rig, who's trying to get in there to steal cards from the corporation. You've got the corporation who are putting things on the table, who are protecting them. Both players are trying to score using the same set of cards that are in the corp's deck. It's amazing. It's just, yeah, asymmetrical. Fantastic asymmetrical game. You've got Chaos in the Old World. Every god's got its own kind of way of, you know, winning the game, kind of approach. The Khorne's trying to kill things, Celestia's trying to get to nobles, Sinch is trying to get to the warp stones, and Nurgle is just trying to corrupt everything. And you've got the 2 different ways of winning. You've got the victory points, you've got the dials, and each one is kind of more tailored for one particular type of victory. And the thing is, the game is all balanced between players, so they all need to keep each other in check, because every god has its own kind of pros and cons, so they all need to try and keep each other in equilibrium in order to keep anyone running away with the game. So yeah, that's a great example. Cry Havoc. Yeah, again, I mean, the combat in it is, you know, is quite similar for all the factions, but all factions have their own kind of stick. You know, you've got the humans who are just kind of good at getting everywhere, mobility and expanding. You've got the Trogs who are just trying to hold territory and are really have the numbers. You've got the machines who've got amazing buildings, and then you've got the Pilgrims who want to try to turtle up and build a victory point engine. You know, they're all very different. Forbidden Stars. Yeah, all the factions play so differently. The Chaos are all about manipulating the warp. The Orcs are all about, you know, throwing lots of guys in. The Marines are good at defending and have a lot of morale. And the Eldar are just, you know, they've got a great fleet. They've got quite a lot of mobility. You know, yeah, it's just another game where all the factions feel really different and are really fun to play as. You have Imperial Settlers, which again I've mentioned for quite a few of the other mechanics, and all the factions in that play quite differently. They can all hold a different resource. They've got custom decks that have different buildings. They've all got their own kind of engines that will lead them towards victory. You've got games like Terra Mystica, Gaia Project, where all the factions are different, they've got different powers. Star Wars Rebellion, highly asymmetrical. It's like cat and mouse with the Galactic Empire and the Rebels. 2 completely different victory conditions, play totally differently. Root, you know, each faction or race has got its own, you know, special powers, its own way of generating points and trying to win the game. Twilight Struggle, you know, the events are completely different in each side, you know, so the Soviets have got a really strong early game, but the Americans, if they can hang on, they get more powerful over the course of the game. And finally, Cosmic Encounter. That game is just nuts. You know, each alien in the game breaks the game, breaks the rules completely, and they're all wildly different, and there are tons of them as well. So yeah, these are games that have asymmetric powers. This is my favourite, absolute favourite mechanic. If your game has this in it and it implements it well, chances are I'm going to love your game. Okay folks, so that was my top 5 favourite mechanics in games. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please like, subscribe, comment, Tell me, what are your favourite mechanics in games? Are there some that you have that I haven't mentioned, or do you agree with some of the ones that I've highlighted? It would be great to know. So until next time, have a great day, and I'll see you later.